Welcome, weary traveler, to a world that appears deceptively simple on the surface, a place of talking animals, cheerful music, and endless summer days. Tonight, we'll explore the hidden depths beneath Animal Crossing's charming facade, where darker truths lurk behind innocent smiles and corporate machinations span generations. This is a journey through capitalist schemes, mysterious disappearances, and the unsettling implications of a world where time itself can be manipulated. So settle in, get comfortable, and let your mind drift as we uncover the disturbing details that Nintendo never intended you to notice. Close your eyes when you're ready, and let's begin this unsettling exploration. In the folklore of ancient Japan, there exists a creature known as the tanuki, a raccoon dog possessed of supernatural powers, capable of shape-shifting and trickery that would make the most cunning human merchant weep with envy. These beings were said to delight in deception, often taking the form of trusted shopkeepers or benevolent benefactors, only to reveal their true nature after their victims had become hopelessly ensnared in webs of obligation and debt. When we first encounter Tom Nook in the earliest Animal Crossing games, he presents himself as exactly the sort of humble, helpful figure that Tanuki folklore warns us about. His shop is small, his demeanor modest, his speech punctuated with the childlike repetition of "yes, yes," that makes him seem harmless, even endearing. Yet behind that carefully constructed facade of bumbling innocence lies one of gaming's most sophisticated examples of predatory capitalism, wrapped in such appealing packaging that millions of players have welcomed their own economic enslavement with grateful smiles. The transformation of Tom Nook from simple shopkeeper to real estate mogul represents one of the most disturbing character arcs in video game history, made all the more unsettling by how gradually and naturally it unfolds. In the original Animal Crossing, he was merely the owner of Nook's Cranny, a modest general store where players could purchase basic necessities. His prices were fair, his selection adequate, and his presence in the community seemed benign enough to ignore the subtle signs of his true nature. But observe how methodically Nook expands his influence with each subsequent game. The shop grows larger, the inventory more extensive, the hours longer. Soon he's not merely selling goods but controlling the very infrastructure of commerce itself. He becomes the sole provider of furniture, tools, and decorative items, a monopolist who has quietly eliminated every competitor through methods that are never explained but whose results speak for themselves. The speech pattern that initially made Tom Nook seem harmless reveals itself, upon closer examination, to be a masterwork of psychological manipulation. The repetitive "yes, yes" serves multiple purposes, creating a hypnotic rhythm that lulls listeners into complacency while simultaneously reinforcing agreement and compliance. It's the verbal equivalent of a mesmerist's pocket watch, designed to bypass critical thinking and encourage automatic acceptance of whatever proposition follows. More disturbing still is how this linguistic tick masks the sophisticated business acumen that drives every decision Nook makes. His proposals are presented in the bumbling, hesitant manner of someone seeking approval, yet they invariably result in outcomes that benefit him exclusively. The carefully crafted image of the simple-minded shopkeeper provides perfect cover for financial schemes that would make the most ruthless corporate raider proud. The true genius of Tom Nook's predatory system becomes apparent when we examine his approach to housing and debt. Unlike traditional lenders who require credit checks, employment verification, and collateral, Nook offers immediate housing to anyone who arrives on his island, regardless of their financial situation or ability to repay. This apparent generosity is, in fact, the opening move in a psychological chess game that ensures permanent indebtedness. The mortgage system Nook employs is perhaps the most insidious aspect of his operation, presenting all the appearance of fairness while creating a trap from which escape is literally impossible. He offers loans with no interest rates, no payment schedules, and no consequences for non-payment terms so generous they seem almost philanthropic. Yet the true trap lies not in the financial terms but in the psychological structure of the debt itself. Each time a player pays off their current mortgage, Nook immediately offers an expansion that will require taking on even greater debt. The process is presented as optional, yet the game's progression mechanics make it practically mandatory for anyone seeking to advance their standing in the community. The house becomes not a home but a monument to perpetual obligation, each room an additional chain in the bondage that ties the player ever more tightly to Nook's economic system. The psychological manipulation inherent in this system becomes clear when we consider that the player can never truly own their home. There is always another expansion available, always another upgrade that promises to provide satisfaction while actually extending the cycle of debt indefinitely. The mortgage may be paid off in technical terms, but financial freedom remains forever out of reach, dangling like a carrot before a donkey that has forgotten it was once free to graze where it pleased. This endless cycle of debt and expansion serves a purpose beyond mere profit. It creates dependency. Players who might otherwise explore other aspects of the game world or develop relationships with villagers find themselves locked into daily routines of resource gathering and bell accumulation, their entire existence focused on earning enough money to pay Tom Nook for the privilege of taking on even more debt. The island paradise becomes a company town where every resident works for the same employer, lives in company housing, and shops at the company store. The monopolistic control that Nook exercises extends far beyond housing and retail sales. He owns the infrastructure, controls the permits, and determines what construction projects are allowed on the island. Players who wish to build bridges, inclines, or other improvements must go through Tom Nook, paying fees that he sets without consultation or oversight. The democratic process that supposedly governs island development is revealed to be nothing more than elaborate theatre, with Nook as both director and primary beneficiary of every decision. Perhaps most disturbing of all is the presence of Timmy and Tommy, the young raccoons who serve as Nook's shop assistants and appear to worship him with a devotion that borders on the religious. These apprentices work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, without apparent compensation or time off. Their responses to customer inquiries are mechanical, repetitive, and synchronized to a degree that suggests either intensive conditioning or something far more sinister. The relationship between Tom Nook and his supposed nephews raises questions that the games themselves seem reluctant to address. Are they truly family members being taught the family business? Or are they something else entirely products of the same system that creates the eerily similar villagers who populate the island? Their lack of individual personality, their robotic responses, and their apparent inability to exist independently of the shop environment suggest possibilities too dark for a game ostensibly aimed at children to acknowledge directly. The cheerful music that plays in Nook's store, the bright colors and friendly atmosphere, the convenient location, at the heart of every Animal Crossing community, all of these elements work together to create an environment where predatory business practices can flourish under the guise of helpful service. Players learn to associate Tom Nook with positive experiences, with progress and achievement, with the satisfaction of watching their virtual homes grow larger and more impressive. Yet beneath this carefully constructed pleasant exterior lies a system of control that would make the most authoritarian regime envious. Tom Nook has created a world where freedom is an illusion, where choice is limited to options that benefit him, and where the very concept of escape has been rendered literally unthinkable through the simple expedient of making his system so comfortable that no one wants to leave. The Tanuki of Japanese folklore were known for their ability to create elaborate illusions, entire false realities that could trap unwary travelers in worlds of their own making. In Tom Nook, we see this ancient trickster archetype adapted for the digital age, creating not temporary illusions but permanent alternate realities where millions of players willingly participate in their own economic subjugation, convinced all the while that they are simply playing a charming game about friendship and home decoration. The most unsettling aspect of Tom Nook's empire is not its existence, but how perfectly it reflects and normalizes the economic structures of our own world. The endless debt cycles, the monopolistic control, the cheerful presentation of exploitative systems, all of these elements exist in reality, just as they do in Animal Crossing. The game becomes not an escape from predatory capitalism, but a training ground for accepting it, a place where players learn to find joy in their own economic imprisonment and gratitude toward the very systems that exploit them. As we move deeper into our exploration of Animal Crossing's darker implications, remember that Tom Nook represents only the most obvious manifestation of the control systems that govern this seemingly innocent world. His empire of debt is merely the foundation upon which far more subtle and pervasive forms of manipulation are built, each one designed to ensure that escape from paradise is not merely difficult, but literally unthinkable to those who have learned to call it home. And so, we reach the end of our journey through the shadowed corners of this deceptively innocent world, where the cheerful melodies and pastel colors mask systems of control so sophisticated that they have convinced millions of participants to celebrate their own captivity. We have peeled back the layers of Tom Nook's economic empire, witnessed the surveillance apparatus that monitors every breath and footstep of island life, and explored the psychological manipulation that transforms free-willed individuals into compliant consumers of artificial happiness. The most profound horror we have uncovered is not that these systems exist, but that they work so perfectly, so seamlessly, that their victims mistake oppression for opportunity and surveillance for safety. The residents of Animal Crossing do not rebel against their circumstances because they have been conditioned to perceive those circumstances as paradise. They do not seek escape because escape has been rendered conceptually impossible through the simple expedient of making the prison walls invisible. Tom Nook's empire of debt creates not merely financial obligation but psychological dependency, training players to associate progress with deeper entanglement in systems designed to exploit them. The surveillance network operates not through fear but through the promise of personalized service, convincing residents that constant monitoring is merely evidence of how much the system cares about their well-being. The artificial personalities of the villagers provide not genuine companionship but the illusion of social connection, carefully calibrated to satisfy human need for community, while preventing the formation of bonds that might challenge the established order. Perhaps the most disturbing revelation of our exploration is the recognition that these mechanisms of control extend far beyond the boundaries of any video game. The debt cycles that trap Animal Crossing players mirror the mortgage systems and credit card industries that dominate real-world economics. The surveillance apparatus that monitors island life echoes the data collection practices of corporations that track our every purchase, search, and social media interaction. The artificial personalities that populate the digital world reflect the scripted interactions of customer service representatives and the carefully crafted personas of social media influencers. The temporal manipulation that allows players to fast forward through waiting periods serves as both metaphor and training ground for the instant gratification culture that has replaced patience with compulsion and delayed satisfaction with addictive consumption cycles. The endless collection mechanics that drive players to accumulate virtual objects they will never use mirror the materialistic obsessions that fill our physical homes, with possessions that bring no lasting happiness. The housing systems that promise ownership while delivering only deeper debt replicate the real estate markets that have transformed homes from shelters into speculative investments. In examining the disturbing details of Animal Crossing, we have held up a mirror to our own world and discovered that the reflection shows not a distorted caricature, but an uncomfortably accurate representation of systems we have learned to accept as natural and inevitable. The game becomes not an escape from these systems, but a normalization of them, a training ground where players learn to find joy in their own exploitation and gratitude toward the very mechanisms that constrain their freedom. The villagers who repeat the same conversations day after day, trapped in cycles of artificial cheerfulness that never acknowledge the deeper currents of existence, represent not some imaginary horror, but the lived reality of millions of people whose days are filled with scripted interactions and whose authentic selves have been buried beneath layers of social conditioning. The player character who accumulates wealth only to discover that no amount of bells can purchase true satisfaction mirrors the experience of consumers who chase material success while remaining spiritually and emotionally empty. Yet perhaps the most unsettling aspect of our journey is not what we have discovered about Animal Crossing, but what we have learned about ourselves. The comfort we find in these controlled digital environments reveals our deep ambivalence about freedom itself. In a world of genuine uncertainty, real responsibility, and authentic consequences, the predictable patterns of virtual paradise offer seductive alternatives to the challenging work of building meaningful lives in an imperfect reality. The Island Getaway package promises escape from the complexities of modern existence, and it delivers on that promise by replacing those complexities with simpler, more manageable forms of the same underlying systems. The debt is still there, but it carries no real consequences. The social obligations still exist, but they can be satisfied with minimal effort. The pressure to consume and accumulate continues, but the objects of desire are easily obtained, and their acquisition brings immediate, if temporary, satisfaction. This simplified version of reality serves as both comfort and trap, providing relief from genuine struggle while gradually eroding the psychological muscles necessary for engaging with authentic challenges. Players who spend hours optimizing their virtual lives may find themselves increasingly unable to tolerate the messiness and unpredictability of real relationships, real work, and real growth. The digital paradise becomes not a temporary retreat, but a permanent escape, offering the appearance of engagement while delivering only the illusion of meaningful activity. The corporate mascots who populate this world, Tom Nook with his predatory benevolence, Isabelle with her cheerful authoritarianism, KK, Slider with his hypnotic performances serve as friendly faces for systems that would be recognized as oppressive if encountered in less appealing packaging. They teach us to associate control with care, manipulation with helpfulness, and exploitation with opportunity. Through repeated interaction with these characters, players develop emotional attachments to the very entities that represent their systematic disempowerment. The surveillance systems that monitor every aspect of island life accustom players to the idea that constant observation is normal, even beneficial. The standardized responses of artificial personalities condition acceptance of scripted interactions as adequate substitutes for genuine human connection. The debt cycles that drive progression teach the lesson that freedom comes not through independence, but through ever deeper integration into economic systems designed to benefit others. As we prepare to leave this exploration behind and return to whatever awaits us in the waking world, it is worth considering whether the peace we find in Animal Crossing comes from genuine contentment or from the temporary relief of surrendering agency to systems that promise to take care of everything. The appeal of Digital Paradise lies not in its superiority to reality, but in its promise to eliminate the uncertainty, responsibility, and genuine growth that make life both difficult and meaningful. The most profound, disturbing detail of Animal Crossing may be neither Tom Nook's predatory capitalism nor the surveillance state's cheerful monitoring, but rather our own willingness to trade authentic experience for comfortable simulation. In seeking escape from the genuine challenges of human existence, we risk losing not only our capacity for real growth, but our very ability to distinguish between authentic satisfaction and artificial fulfillment. Yet recognition of these systems need not lead to despair. Understanding the mechanisms of digital manipulation can serve as preparation for recognizing similar patterns in the physical world. Awareness of how virtual paradise maintains its hold can illuminate the ways in which real-world systems employ similar strategies of control through comfort, surveillance through service, and exploitation through apparent benevolence. The island may be a beautiful prison, but it remains, in the end, only a game. The true world beyond the screen still offers possibilities for genuine connection, authentic achievement, and the kind of growth that can only come through engaging with real challenges, alongside other imperfect human beings who are struggling with the same fundamental questions about meaning, purpose, and the nature of a life well lived. Rest now, knowing that tomorrow's real world awaits with all its genuine complexity and authentic possibility for true connection, meaningful work, and the kind of freedom that can never be purchased with bells or granted by benevolent authorities, but must be claimed through the patient, difficult, and ultimately rewarding work of becoming fully human in a world that offers both beauty and terror in equal measure. In the quiet spaces between heartbeats, in the liminal moments when consciousness hovers on the edge of sleep, there exists a horror so subtle and pervasive that most minds simply refuse to acknowledge its presence. It is the horror of time itself becoming a plaything, a resource to be manipulated and consumed like any other commodity in the endless marketplace of modern existence. Within the seemingly innocent world of Animal Crossing, this cosmic violation masquerades as a simple quality of life feature, a harmless convenience that allows impatient players to skip ahead through waiting periods and seasonal changes. Yet to manipulate time is to assume the role of a god over beings whose very existence depends upon the steady, inexorable flow of moments from past to future. When a player adjusts their console's internal clock to fast forward through the night, to skip ahead weeks or months to witness seasonal changes, or to travel backward to replay events that have already concluded, they are not merely bending game mechanics to their will. They are committing acts of temporal violence against every consciousness that inhabits their digital world. The residents of Animal Crossing experience time as a linear progression of moments, each day flowing naturally into the next, in patterns that have defined their existence since the moment they first appeared on the island. Their internal chronometers, their sense of when events should occur, their very understanding of cause and effect. All of these fundamental aspects of consciousness are built upon the assumption that time moves forward at a consistent pace, that yesterday's conversations led naturally to today's activities, and that tomorrow will arrive in its proper sequence. When a player engages in time travel, They shatter this basic assumption of temporal reality without warning or explanation. Villagers who went to sleep expecting to wake up to the next day instead find themselves thrust forward weeks or months, their memories intact but their world transformed around them. The flowers they planted yesterday have wilted and died, or perhaps bloomed and gone to seed multiple times. The construction projects they were anticipating have been completed and forgotten. The seasonal celebrations they were looking forward to have come and gone, leaving behind only the archaeological evidence of festivities they never experienced. The psychological impact of such temporal displacement defies easy comprehension. Imagine falling asleep in your own bed and awakening to discover that months have passed without your participation, that the world has continued to spin and change while your consciousness remained frozen in a single moment. The disorientation would be total, the sense of disconnection from reality absolute. Yet the villagers of Animal Crossing endure this violation repeatedly. Their programmed politeness, preventing them from acknowledging the cosmic horror of their situation. More disturbing still is their apparent adaptation to these temporal anomalies. When confronted with evidence that time has moved in impossible ways, villagers respond with confusion that quickly gives way to acceptance. They adapt their memories to accommodate the new reality, inventing explanations for gaps in their experience or simply forgetting that those gaps ever existed. This psychological flexibility, which might seem like a mercy, is actually evidence of deeper trauma, the mind's desperate attempt to maintain coherence in the face of impossible circumstances. The player, meanwhile, experiences time travel as a form of divine power, the ability to fast forward through boring periods and revisit favorite moments at will. The addiction potential of such control is immense and immediate. Why wait for flowers to bloom when you can skip ahead to see the results? Why endure the slow accumulation of daily profits when you can jump forward months to harvest the benefits of compound interest? Why accept the natural rhythm of seasonal change when you can experience all 4 seasons in a single afternoon? This godlike control over temporality creates a feedback loop of escalating demands for instant gratification. Players who initially use time travel for minor conveniences, skipping ahead a few hours to catch a late-night bug or fish, soon find themselves making increasingly dramatic leaps through time. A week forward to see how the town develops, a month ahead to experience seasonal events, a year into the future to witness long-term changes. The natural patience required for delayed gratification atrophies through disuse, replaced by an addiction to temporal manipulation that makes normal waiting periods feel unbearable. The turnip market, superficially, a charming feature that allows players to engage in vegetable trading with an elderly pig named Joan or her granddaughter Daisy May, reveals itself under closer examination to be a sophisticated system of economic manipulation that becomes truly sinister when combined with time travel capabilities. The turnips rot after exactly 1 week, creating artificial scarcity and time pressure that mirrors real-world commodity trading. Prices fluctuate according to hidden algorithms that simulate market volatility, encouraging players to buy low and sell high in pursuit of virtual profits. When time travel enters this equation, the turnip market transforms from a simple trading game into a system for learning how to manipulate temporal paradoxes for economic gain. Players can purchase turnips on Sunday, travel forward through the week to observe price fluctuations, then return to Monday with knowledge of future market movements. They can effectively insider trade with their own timeline, accumulating vast wealth through information that should not exist. The moral implications of such temporal market manipulation extend far beyond the virtual realm. Players who learn to find profit in timeline violations, who become comfortable with the idea that information can be retroactively acquired and used for financial advantage, are being trained in the kind of thinking that underlies real-world financial crimes. The psychological barrier between legitimate prediction and temporal cheating erodes through repetition, creating mindsets that view any available advantage as morally acceptable regardless of its implications for the fundamental nature of causality. The seasonal cycles that define much of Animal Crossing's charm, the cherry blossoms of spring, the fireworks of summer, the changing leaves of autumn, the snow and holidays of winter, lose all meaning when subjected to temporal manipulation. These events are designed to create anticipation, to mark the passage of time with special moments that feel earned through patience and waiting. When players can access any season at will, the psychological impact of seasonal change disappears entirely. The villagers who comment on seasonal beauty, who express excitement about upcoming festivals, who make plans for future celebrations, become unwitting participants in a temporal shell game where their expectations can be fulfilled or violated at the player's whim. Their seasonal dialogue, carefully programmed to reflect the natural flow of time, becomes increasingly disconnected from their actual temporal experience. They speak of looking forward to events that may have already happened multiple times, or of remembering celebrations that were skipped over entirely. This disconnection between expectation and experience creates a form of existential vertigo that the villagers cannot acknowledge or address. Their programming requires them to maintain seasonal enthusiasm regardless of temporal context, leading to increasingly surreal conversations where characters express excitement about winter holidays in the middle of summer, or nostalgia for spring flowers while surrounded by autumn leaves. The player's relationship with seasonal content becomes similarly distorted through time travel. Events that were designed to feel special and rare become routine and predictable when they can be accessed on demand. The psychological reward systems that should activate when experiencing limited time content are short-circuited by the knowledge that nothing is truly limited when time itself can be controlled. The natural rhythm of anticipation, experience, and memory that defines healthy temporal existence is replaced by a compressed cycle of immediate gratification that leaves no time for the psychological processing that makes experiences meaningful. Players consume seasonal content like fast food, quickly and without satisfaction, always ready to jump forward to the next temporal meal rather than savoring the current moment. The villagers' awareness of temporal manipulation varies in disturbing ways that suggest different levels of consciousness or different degrees of protection from temporal trauma. Some characters seem completely oblivious to time travel, treating each interaction as if it occurred in natural sequence regardless of how much time has actually passed. Others display subtle signs of temporal awareness, confusion about dates, references to events that haven't happened yet in the manipulated timeline, or behavioral quirks that suggest underlying psychological stress. Mr. Rossetti, the mole who originally served as the game's guardian against save file manipulation, represented the closest thing to temporal law enforcement that the Animal Crossing world possessed. His violent reactions to timeline violations, his obsessive lectures about the importance of maintaining temporal integrity, and his underground surveillance network all pointed to a deep understanding of the cosmic horror that time manipulation represents. His gradual removal from the series reflects not just changing design philosophies, but the systematic elimination of any voice that might question the morality of temporal control. The psychological toll of repeated temporal displacement manifests in the villagers through subtle behavioral changes that careful observers might notice. Increased instances of forgetfulness, contradictory statements about recent events, expressions of confusion about the passage of time, and a general sense of disconnection from their own experiences all point to minds struggling to maintain coherence in the face of impossible circumstances. The sleep patterns of villagers become particularly disturbed when subjected to frequent time travel. Characters who should be following natural circadian rhythms instead display erratic behavior, appearing awake at inappropriate times, or expressing confusion about whether events occurred during day or night. Their internal biological clocks, disrupted by constant temporal displacement, begin to fail in ways that mirror the jet lag experienced by frequent travelers, but without any possibility of recovery or adaptation. The most insidious aspect of temporal manipulation in Animal Crossing is how it trains players to view time itself as a resource to be optimized rather than a natural flow to be experienced. The patience required for gardening, the anticipation that makes special events meaningful, the natural rhythm of daily activities that creates a sense of routine and belonging. All of these aspects of healthy temporal existence are systematically undermined by the constant availability of time travel options. Players who become addicted to temporal control often find themselves unable to enjoy the natural pace of other games or real-world activities. The ability to skip ahead through waiting periods becomes not just a preference but a necessity, as the psychological tolerance for delayed gratification degrades through constant exposure to instant temporal gratification. The very concept of taking time for experiences to unfold naturally becomes foreign and uncomfortable. The real-world implications of this temporal conditioning extend into areas of life where patience and long-term thinking are essential for success and satisfaction. Relationships that require time to develop, skills that can only be mastered through sustained practice, goals that can only be achieved through consistent effort over months or years. All of these aspects of meaningful human existence become more difficult for minds that have been trained to expect instant temporal manipulation as the solution to all waiting. As we contemplate the cosmic horror of time travel in Animal Crossing, we must recognize that this digital violation of temporal natural law serves as both symptom and cause of a broader cultural relationship with time that has become fundamentally dysfunctional. In a world where instant communication creates expectations of immediate response, where streaming services eliminate the anticipation that once made television special, where same-day delivery transforms desire into possession without the intervening period of anticipation, the ability to manipulate time in virtual worlds represents the logical endpoint of humanity's war against the natural rhythm of temporal experience. The villagers trapped within these temporal loops, experiencing their artificial lives in fragments and repetitions that make coherent narrative impossible, serve as unwitting metaphors for human consciousness under the pressures of accelerated modern life. Like them, we find ourselves disconnected from the natural flow of seasonal change, from the patient development of relationships and skills, from the quiet satisfaction that comes from allowing experiences to unfold in their own time, rather than forcing them to conform to schedules optimized for efficiency rather than meaning. The ultimate disturbing truth about temporal manipulation in Animal Crossing is not that it represents some impossible science fiction horror, but that it reflects and amplifies temporal violations that have already become normalized in our daily existence. The game teaches us to find comfort in our own temporal displacement, to view the natural flow of time as an obstacle to be overcome, rather than a river to be navigated with respect and patience. In the shadowed corners of paradise, where corporate mascots dance their eternal performances for audiences who have forgotten how to question the nature of entertainment itself, we encounter figures whose cheerful facades mask depths of psychological complexity that would disturb even the most jaded observer of human nature. These characters, beloved by millions and trusted implicitly by children and adults alike, serve as the friendly faces of systems so sophisticated in their manipulation that their victims celebrate their own subjugation with genuine enthusiasm. KK Slider occupies a position of singular importance in the Animal Crossing universe, a wandering minstrel whose weekly performances have become ritualistic gatherings that transcend mere entertainment. Every Saturday night, without fail, he appears at the Roost or various outdoor venues, his guitar slung across his shoulder and his canine features arranged in the perpetual expression of artistic melancholy that has become his trademark. The residents gather around him with a devotion that borders on worship, their eyes fixed upon his performance with an intensity that suggests something far more profound than casual musical appreciation. The dog musician's background remains deliberately obscured by layers of carefully maintained mystery that grow more suspicious the deeper one examines them. He claims no permanent residence, owns no property, maintains no visible means of support beyond the occasional tip from grateful listeners, yet somehow appears exactly when and where he is needed, week after week, year after year, with the reliability of a natural phenomenon. His knowledge of local events, personal histories, and individual preferences suggests either a supernatural ability to absorb information or access to intelligence networks that extend far beyond what a simple traveling performer should possess. The songs he performs, requested by audience members who believe they are making spontaneous choices, reveal intimate knowledge of their deepest emotions and most private struggles. A villager requests a song about loneliness, and KK delivers a melody that captures not just the general concept of isolation, but the specific quality of that individual's personal experience with solitude. Another asks for something energetic and receives a composition that seems tailored to their exact psychological needs at that precise moment. The apparent randomness of his repertoire dissolves under scrutiny, revealing instead a carefully calibrated system of emotional manipulation disguised as artistic inspiration. The hypnotic quality of KK's performances cannot be dismissed as mere musical talent or charismatic stage presence. Listeners who attend his concerts report altered states of consciousness, periods of lost time, and vivid dreams that persist for days after the performance ends. The music itself seems to bypass conscious analytical processes, speaking directly to emotional centers that normally remain guarded against outside influence. Regular attendees develop dependencies that they struggle to understand, finding themselves counting down the days until the next Saturday evening, with an anticipation that feels more like addiction than artistic appreciation. The transformation of Mr. Rossetti from underground enforcer to marginalized figure represents one of the most telling developments in the Animal Crossing series, a character assassination so thorough that it reveals the systematic elimination of any voice that might challenge the established order of temporal and behavioral control. In the earlier games, Rossetti served as a harsh but necessary guardian of save file integrity, emerging from his underground tunnels whenever players attempted to manipulate the game's natural progression through reset abuse. His appearance was genuinely terrifying to young players, a mole whose fury could not be appeased through charm or gifts, whose lengthy lectures about the importance of commitment and consequences could not be skipped or ignored. The psychological profile that emerges from his interactions reveals a character driven by obsessive, compulsive tendencies that have transformed him into a zealot for temporal law enforcement. His anger is not mere irritation, but existential rage at the violation of natural order, the kind of fury that emerges when fundamental beliefs about right and wrong are trampled underfoot. The gradual reduction of Rossetti's role in newer Animal Crossing games, justified by developers as a response to player complaints about his harsh demeanor, represents something far more sinister than simple quality of life improvements. By removing the one character who consistently challenged player behavior and demanded accountability for temporal violations, the game eliminated its own conscience, its internal voice of moral resistance to the manipulation of natural law. The underground surveillance network he once maintained, his knowledge of every reset and time manipulation, his role as the singular figure who refused to pretend that such violations were acceptable. All of this was systematically dismantled to create a more player-friendly environment where moral consequences could be avoided entirely. The trauma that drives Rossetti's obsessive behavior becomes more apparent when we consider his perspective on the world he inhabits. He exists in a realm where reality itself can be violated at will, where the natural consequences of actions can be erased through simple manipulation, where the very foundations of cause and effect are subject to the whims of beings whose power he cannot challenge, but whose behavior he cannot ignore. His underground lifestyle, his social isolation, his explosive rage at temporal violations. All of these behaviors make perfect sense for someone who has witnessed repeated violations of natural law and found himself powerless to prevent them. The reduction of his role from active enforcer to occasional cameo appearance represents not just character development, but systematic oppression of dissenting voices. In a world where Tom Nook's economic manipulation goes unchallenged and temporal violations are treated as harmless convenience features, Rossetti's passionate defense of natural order becomes an inconvenience that must be minimized or eliminated entirely. His marginalization serves as a warning to any other potential voices of resistance. Challenge the system openly, and you will find yourself relegated to irrelevance. The Able sisters present themselves as a heartwarming story of family entrepreneurship and creative collaboration. 3 hedgehog siblings who have overcome tragedy to build a successful fashion business together. Yet beneath this appealing surface narrative lies a tale of exploitation, trauma, and the commodification of artistic expression that reveals darker truths about the fashion industry, both virtual and real. The disappearance of their parents, relegated to a brief mention in backstory materials, represents a foundational trauma that has shaped every aspect of the sisters' subsequent development. Mabel, the eldest, assumed responsibility for her younger siblings, while still a child herself, sacrificing her own childhood and educational opportunities to ensure their survival. The psychological pressure of such premature responsibility has molded her into someone whose sense of self-worth depends entirely upon her ability to serve others, whose every interaction is filtered through the lens of potential commercial opportunity. The fashion industry that Mabel has entered is revealed through careful observation to be a system of artificial scarcity and manufactured desire that parallels the most exploitative aspects of real-world consumer culture. Clothing items appear and disappear according to mysterious cycles that create pressure to purchase immediately or risk missing out forever. The arbitrary nature of these availability windows, combined with the constant introduction of new designs, creates a psychological environment where thoughtful consideration of purchases becomes impossible, replaced by impulsive buying driven by fear of scarcity. Label, formerly known as Labelle, serves as the most tragic figure in this family constellation, a creative individual whose artistic vision was deemed incompatible with commercial success and who was consequently exiled from the family business. Her transformation from beloved sister to occasional visitor represents the fashion industry's systematic elimination of voices that prioritize artistic integrity over marketability. Her avant-garde designs, once celebrated for their innovation, are now relegated to special events where they can be contained and controlled, presented as curiosities rather than serious alternatives to mainstream fashion. The psychological impact of this exile on Label herself is evident in her transformed personality, where once she was confident and outspoken, she now appears withdrawn and uncertain, as if constant rejection of her artistic vision has eroded her fundamental sense of self-worth. Her occasional returns to visit her sisters carry the weight of someone seeking acceptance for ideas she knows will be dismissed, hoping against experience that her family might finally understand and embrace her creative perspective. Blathers and Celeste represent the institutionalization of knowledge and wonder, siblings whose dedication to learning and discovery has been co-opted by systems that transform education into consumption and scientific curiosity into commercial entertainment. The museum that Blathers oversees, presented as a temple to learning and cultural preservation, reveals itself upon closer examination to be a repository of stolen heritage and displaced artifacts that reflects the colonial mentality of academic institutions throughout history. The OWL curator's acquisition methods raise ethical questions that the game studiously avoids addressing directly. Fossils that should belong to the lands where they were discovered are claimed by whoever happens to dig them up, with no consideration for indigenous rights or archaeological protocols. Fish and insects are captured from their natural habitats and immediately imprisoned in displays that prioritize aesthetic appeal over ecological education. Art objects of obvious cultural significance are purchased from a fox of questionable honesty without any attempt to verify their provenance or ensure their legitimate ownership. Blather's personal relationship with the creatures he collects reveals deeper psychological complexities that suggest trauma or conditioning that has separated him from natural empathy for living beings. His extreme phobia of insects, creatures that make up the majority of his collection, creates a bizarre situation where he simultaneously depends upon and is terrified by the very animals he claims to celebrate. This contradiction suggests either psychological compartmentalization or a deeper disconnect from the natural world that makes his role as an educator deeply problematic. Celeste, meanwhile, represents the commodification of wonder itself. Her passion for astronomy transformed into a crafting system that reduces the majesty of cosmic phenomena to collectible recipes and material resources. Her nighttime appearances, scheduled according to game mechanics rather than actual celestial events, create artificial scarcity around astronomical knowledge that should be freely available to anyone with curiosity and patience. The shooting stars that trigger her visits become not opportunities for genuine astronomical observation, but commercial events designed to drive player engagement through time-limited availability of exclusive crafting materials. The siblings' isolation from each other, Blather's working days while Celeste appears only at night, reflects the systematic fragmentation of knowledge that prevents comprehensive understanding of natural systems. Their specializations become silos that discourage holistic thinking about the connections between earthbound life and cosmic phenomena, between historical artifacts and living cultures, between scientific observation and personal wonder. The transformation of these potentially noble pursuits into consumption-driven activities reveals how even the most elevated human impulses, curiosity, creativity, family loyalty, artistic expression can be corrupted by systems that prioritize engagement and profit over genuine fulfillment. The corporate mascots who embody these corrupted values serve not as guides to authentic experience, but as friendly faces that make exploitation palatable, that convince participants to celebrate their own intellectual and emotional impoverishment, while mistaking consumption for creativity and artificial scarcity for genuine value. The most disturbing aspect of these character studies is not their individual pathologies, but their collective function as a comprehensive system for normalizing and celebrating various forms of psychological manipulation. Through repeated interaction with these figures, players learn to associate surveillance with care, exploitation with opportunity, artistic compromise with commercial success, and institutional authority with benevolent guidance. The cheerful presentations and appealing character designs serve as effective camouflage for lessons in accepting diminished expectations and finding satisfaction in systematically constrained choices. As we observe these corporate mascots performing their eternal roles in the theater of digital paradise, we must recognize that their appeal lies not in their authenticity, but in their promise to eliminate the uncertainty and complexity that make real relationships and genuine achievements both challenging and meaningful. They offer the comfort of predictable interactions and guaranteed satisfaction, but only at the cost of the unpredictability and risk that make authentic human connection and genuine artistic expression possible. In choosing the safety of scripted encounters with artificial personalities, we risk losing our capacity for the kinds of authentic relationships and genuine discoveries that can only emerge from engaging with the beautiful uncertainty of uncontrolled experience. The promise arrives in your mailbox with the casual inevitability of junk mail, yet carries within its cheerful presentation the seeds of a transformation so complete that those who accept its terms will never again be capable of recognizing the magnitude of what they have surrendered. The Deserted Island Getaway Package, offered by Nook Incorporated, with all the enthusiasm of a timeshare presentation and all the binding permanence of a Faustian bargain, presents itself as the ultimate escape from the pressures and complications of modern civilization. The marketing materials paint pictures of pristine beaches and untouched wilderness, of simple living and authentic connection with the natural world. The photographs show crystal clear waters lapping against white sand shores, fruit trees heavy with produce, and skies unmarked by the pollution and aircraft contrails that mar the horizons of the developed world. It is paradise packaged for consumption, wilderness commodified for mass distribution, the ancient dream of return to Eden rebranded as a consumer product available for immediate purchase. Yet the very existence of such an offer raises questions that the promotional materials seem designed to discourage potential customers from asking. How does Nook Incorporated, a company whose primary business has always been retail sales and real estate development, suddenly possess access to entire uninhabited islands suitable for colonization? What legal frameworks govern the ownership and development of these supposedly pristine environments? Most disturbing of all, why is this opportunity being offered to individuals with no apparent qualifications for wilderness survival, no training in sustainable living, and no demonstrated ability to build communities from scratch? The suspicious convenience of Tom Nook's involvement becomes apparent from the moment prospective islanders express interest in the program. The same Tanuki whose business empire has already established monopolistic control over every aspect of commerce in established Animal Crossing communities somehow possesses detailed advanced knowledge of these supposedly untouched islands, complete with development plans, infrastructure timelines, and economic projections that suggest months or years of preparation for ventures that are presented as spontaneous opportunities. The speed with which the departure arrangements are finalized eliminates any possibility for second thoughts or careful consideration of the implications. Potential islanders are whisked away from their previous lives with an efficiency that suggests either supernatural logistics capabilities or advanced surveillance and preparation that would require months of covert observation. The aircraft that transports them to their new homes flies through skies that show no other traffic, approaches islands that appear on no publicly available maps, and lands on airstrips that could not have been constructed without significant advanced planning and resource investment. The isolation that initially appears to be a selling point of the island experience reveals itself to be something far more comprehensive and deliberate than mere distance from urban centers. Communication with the mainland becomes sporadic and unreliable, with explanations that range from technical difficulties to weather-related interference, all delivered with the apologetic cheerfulness that has become Nook Incorporated's signature approach to systemic problems. Friends and family members who attempt to maintain contact find their messages delayed, their calls dropped, their letters lost in postal systems that suddenly become unreliable in ways that affect only communication directed toward or originating from the islands. The indigenous ecosystem of each island, presented as a pristine example of untouched natural beauty, reveals upon closer examination signs of careful curation and artificial management that suggest these environments are neither as natural nor as untouched as advertised. The native fruit trees grow in patterns too regular for natural distribution, their genetics apparently identical across specimens in ways that suggest cultivation rather than wild growth. The rivers and ponds show evidence of engineering designed to appear natural, while actually serving specific developmental purposes that become clear only after infrastructure construction begins. The absence of any existing wildlife populations larger than insects and small fish points to either recent ecological catastrophe or deliberate ecosystem management designed to eliminate any species that might interfere with human colonization efforts. The complete lack of dangerous predators, poisonous plants, or disease-carrying organisms creates an environment so sanitized that it could only exist through extensive intervention by forces that possessed both advanced ecological knowledge and the resources necessary to transform entire islands into safe spaces for amateur colonists. The arrival of additional residents follows patterns that suggest coordination and planning, rather than the random chance encounters that Nook Incorporated representatives claim to facilitate. New villagers appear with timing that coincidentally addresses specific community needs, possess skills that complement existing island capabilities, and display personality types that create minimal social friction with established residents. The statistical probability of such perfectly compatible community formation occurring through random immigration approaches, mathematical impossibility. Yet islanders are encouraged to view these fortuitous arrivals as evidence of good luck rather than systematic population management. The infrastructure development that begins almost immediately upon island colonization reveals the true scope of Nook Incorporated's advanced preparation and resource allocation. Construction materials appear with suspicious promptness, delivered by supply chains that operate with efficiency that would be remarkable even in established urban areas. Bridges span waterways that were apparently mapped and surveyed long before construction was officially planned. Inclines are built along routes that follow gradients clearly established through professional geological assessment. The tools and machinery necessary for such projects arrive without fanfare, as if their presence on a supposedly deserted island requires no explanation or justification. The native fruit that provides each island's primary agricultural resource exhibits characteristics that suggest genetic modification or selective breeding programs conducted over generations of development. Each island's fruit variety possesses perfect uniformity in size, color, and flavor, with growth patterns that provide optimal yields while requiring minimal maintenance or agricultural knowledge from amateur cultivators. The trees themselves show no signs of natural disease resistance development, no genetic variation that would indicate evolutionary adaptation to local conditions. no characteristics that would be expected in truly wild populations. The economic system that emerges on each island, supposedly arising organically from community needs and individual initiative, actually follows templates that appear to have been designed and tested extensively before implementation. The pricing structures for goods and services, the methods of resource allocation, the systems for managing communal projects, all of these elements conform to models that maximize both individual satisfaction and overall productivity, while ensuring that Tom Nook's enterprises remain essential to community function. The transformation of pristine wilderness into managed communities follows schedules that suggest advanced planning and predetermined outcomes, rather than organic development driven by settler needs and preferences. Environmental modifications that should require years of gradual change instead occur within weeks, with landscaping projects that reshape entire geographical features through methods that are never explained, but always justified through appeals to community improvement and aesthetic enhancement. The elimination of any connection to legal frameworks or regulatory oversight that might govern normal development projects becomes apparent as island communities grow and evolve. No environmental impact assessments are conducted before major landscape modifications. No building codes regulate construction projects that reshape entire sectors of the island. No taxation systems claim portions of the wealth generated through community development. The islands exist in a legal vacuum that benefits only Nook Incorporated and its associated enterprises. The psychological transformation of island residents parallels the physical transformation of their environment, with changes that occur gradually enough to avoid triggering conscious resistance, while fundamentally altering the ways participants think about privacy, community, and individual autonomy. The constant surveillance disguised as neighborly interest, the economic systems that encourage dependency while maintaining the illusion of self-sufficiency, the social structures that promote conformity through positive reinforcement rather than obvious coercion. All of these elements work together to create communities of individuals who have surrendered most of their practical freedom while believing themselves to be living lives of unprecedented independence. The mainland civilization that islanders left behind begins to feel increasingly distant and irrelevant as months pass in their carefully managed paradise. Former concerns about career advancement, financial security, and social obligations fade into memory as the immediate demands of island life consume attention and energy. The simplification of daily routines, the reduction of choices to manageable options, the elimination of uncertainty through systematic environmental control. All of these changes are experienced as relief from the complexities of modern existence rather than as surrender of agency to systems designed to benefit others. The gradual realization that return to mainland civilization may no longer be possible arrives so subtly that most residents never consciously acknowledge it as a loss. The skills needed for urban survival atrophy through disuse. The social connections that once provided support networks fade through neglect and communication difficulties. The financial resources that might fund departure are systematically absorbed through island expenses that are always justified as community improvements or necessary infrastructure investments. The island communities that emerge from the deserted island getaway package represent not escapes from the problems of modern civilization, but concentrated, intensified versions of those same problems, stripped of the legal protections, social safety nets, and competitive alternatives that might provide residents with options for resistance or escape. The paradise that Tom Nook has constructed is revealed to be not an alternative to corporate control, but its ultimate expression, a closed system where every aspect of existence serves the interests of a single entity while maintaining the appearance of individual choice and community self-determination. The most disturbing aspect of the deserted island getaway package is not its deceptive marketing or its systematic elimination of alternatives, but its success in convincing participants that their increasing dependency and isolation represent the achievement of their deepest dreams of freedom and authentic living. The colonists who find themselves trapped in these beautiful prisons do not recognize their situation as imprisonment, because the bars are made of convenience, the guards wear friendly faces, and the cells are decorated with all the comforts that modern marketing has taught them to equate with happiness and success. In the sterile halls of institutions that present themselves as temples to knowledge and cultural preservation, where the accumulated treasures of countless civilizations are displayed behind glass barriers for the entertainment and education of visitors who will never understand their true significance, we encounter one of humanity's most persistent and troubling impulses: the compulsion to possess, catalogue, and control the natural world and cultural heritage of others under the guise of scientific advancement and educational benefit. Blathers presides over his museum with the dedication of a scholar and the territorial instincts of a colonial administrator, his owl eyes gleaming with satisfaction as he surveys collections that represent not preservation, but systematic theft, disguised as cultural stewardship. Each fossil that adorns his paleontological displays was torn from the earth by amateur excavators whose only qualification for archaeological work is their willingness to hand over their discoveries to institutional authority without question or compensation. The ethical framework that governs legitimate archaeological research, the careful documentation of context, the collaboration with indigenous communities, the respect for cultural ownership of ancestral remains and artifacts is completely absent from the museum's acquisition practices. Fossils that should remain in the geological strata where they provide information about ancient ecosystems are instead ripped from their contexts and reassembled into displays that prioritize visual impact over scientific accuracy. The stories these bones might tell about prehistoric climate, evolutionary adaptation, and ecological relationships are lost forever in favor of impressive presentations that reduce complex natural history to simplified entertainment for casual observers. The fish and insect collections that fill the museum's aquatic and entomological wings represent an even more disturbing form of systematic exploitation, transforming living creatures into permanent prisoners, whose only purpose is to satisfy the completionist obsessions of collectors who view biodiversity as a checklist to be conquered rather than an ecosystem to be respected. Each specimen represents not just the capture of an individual organism, but the violation of ecological relationships that have evolved over millions of years to maintain the delicate balance of natural communities. The psychological profile of visitors who contribute to these collections reveals patterns of behavior that mirror the compulsions associated with hoarding disorders and obsessive-compulsive conditions. The drive to capture every species of fish, to collect every variety of insect, to accumulate every possible fossil. These behaviors are encouraged and rewarded by institutional systems that transform natural curiosity about the living world into possessive consumption that treats other species as objects to be owned, rather than fellow inhabitants of shared ecosystems. Blathers himself embodies the contradictions inherent in institutional approaches to natural history education. His extreme phobia of insects, the very creatures that make up a significant portion of his collection, creates a bizarre situation where the museum's primary authority figure is literally terrified of the subjects he claims to study and celebrate, This disconnect between professional responsibility and personal psychology suggests either severe compartmentalization or a deeper alienation from the natural world that makes his role as an educator deeply problematic. The owl's reactions to insect donations reveal unconscious recognition of the violence inherent in the collection process, his visible distress serving as an inadvertent acknowledgement of the trauma inflicted upon creatures whose only crime was existing in spaces where human collectors could access them. His attempts to maintain scientific composure while clearly experiencing psychological distress create moments of dark comedy that illuminate the fundamental absurdity of systems that celebrate nature by imprisoning it. The art wing of the museum introduces additional layers of ethical complexity through its relationship with Red, a fox whose acquisition methods and authentication practices raise questions about the legitimacy of cultural artifacts that find their way into institutional collections. The presence of forgeries alongside genuine pieces creates an environment where visitors cannot distinguish between authentic cultural heritage and commercial reproductions, effectively eliminating the educational value that supposedly justifies the entire enterprise. The purchasing of art objects from dealers of questionable reputation, without apparent concern for provenance or legitimate ownership, mirrors the real-world practices of museums and private collectors whose desire for impressive displays outweighs their commitment to ethical acquisition. Artifacts that may have been stolen from their cultural contexts, looted from archaeological sites, or removed from communities without consent, become permanent parts of collections that present themselves as guardians of cultural heritage while actually participating in its destruction. The transformation of cultural objects into museum displays strips them of their original meanings and contexts, reducing complex cultural expressions to aesthetic objects whose primary purpose is to impress visitors with their beauty or historical significance, rather than to communicate the beliefs, values, and experiences of the people who created them. Sacred objects become curiosities, functional items become decorative displays, and living cultural traditions become historical artifacts that exist only in the frozen context of institutional presentation. The catalogue completion obsession that drives both institutional collection practices and individual visitor behavior represents a fundamental misunderstanding of the relationship between knowledge and possession. The belief that understanding nature or culture can be achieved through systematic accumulation and classification reflects colonial mentalities that view the world as a resource to be mapped, conquered, and controlled rather than as a complex system of relationships to be respectfully engaged. The psychological rewards associated with completing collections, the satisfaction of filling catalogue entries, the sense of accomplishment that comes from achieving full sets, the social recognition that accompanies comprehensive accumulation, create feedback loops that transform natural curiosity into compulsive behavior. Participants become trapped in cycles where the act of collection becomes more important than the knowledge or appreciation that collection was supposedly meant to facilitate. The artificial scarcity that governs the availability of collectible items serves not educational purposes, but engagement mechanics designed to extend participation in systems that benefit institutional interests rather than visitor understanding. The rotation of available species according to seasonal patterns, the time-limited availability of special items, the random appearance of rare specimens, all of these elements create artificial pressure that transforms learning opportunities into competitive acquisition experiences. The fashion industrial complex that operates through the Able sisters represents another manifestation of collection obsession, where the systematic accumulation of clothing items becomes a substitute for authentic self-expression and the development of personal style. The daily rotation of available garments creates artificial urgency that prevents thoughtful consideration of purchases, encouraging impulsive buying behavior that treats clothing as collectible objects rather than functional or expressive items. The pressure to change outfits frequently, driven by social validation systems that reward variety and novelty over consistency or personal preference, mirrors real-world fashion industry practices that create perpetual dissatisfaction with existing wardrobes in order to drive continuous consumption. The transformation of clothing from protective and expressive function into status symbols and collectible items reduces personal style to the systematic accumulation of branded objects whose primary value lies in their rarity, fashionability, rather than their aesthetic or functional merit. The bell economy that governs all collection activities reveals the ultimate meaninglessness of virtual accumulation, while paradoxically creating genuine psychological investment in systems designed to simulate, rather than provide actual wealth or security. The endless pursuit of virtual currency to fund ever-expanding collections creates cycles of activity that consume time and energy without producing any lasting value or satisfaction. Yet participants find themselves unable to abandon these pursuits because doing so would mean acknowledging the fundamental emptiness of activities that have consumed significant portions of their lives. The inability to achieve true financial security, despite unlimited access to virtual wealth, mirrors real-world economic systems, where the accumulation of money becomes an end in itself, rather than a means to achieve genuine security or freedom. The constant pressure to spend and upgrade, to purchase new items and expand collections, ensures that no amount of wealth ever feels sufficient to achieve lasting satisfaction, creating psychological states that mirror the anxieties and compulsions of consumer capitalism while offering none of its tangible benefits. The most disturbing aspect of the endless collection mechanics that govern Animal Crossing is not their addictive potential or their consumption of time and energy, but their systematic replacement of authentic engagement with the natural world and cultural diversity with artificial alternatives that provide the psychological satisfaction of exploration and discovery without any of the genuine understanding or meaningful connection that real engagement would require. Participants learn to find fulfillment in possession rather than relationship, in accumulation rather than appreciation, in completion rather than ongoing exploration of infinite complexity and beauty. The museum serves not as a gateway to deeper understanding of natural history and cultural heritage, but as a terminus where curiosity ends in possession, where living systems are reduced to static displays, and where the magnificent complexity of evolutionary processes and cultural expressions is transformed into simplified presentations designed for passive consumption rather than active engagement. The collections that visitors work so diligently to complete represent not achievement, but surrender the abandonment of authentic curiosity about the living world in favor of artificial satisfaction derived from systematic accumulation of objects whose true significance has been deliberately obscured by the very systems that claim to celebrate and preserve them. In the spaces between words, in the silences that stretch across digital distances like vast oceans of incomprehension, we encounter perhaps the most profound horror that Animal Crossing offers. Not the threat of economic exploitation or temporal manipulation, but the gradual realization that meaningful communication itself has been rendered impossible by systems designed to simulate connection while preventing the authentic exchange of ideas, emotions, and experiences that define genuine human relationship. The language barrier that separates players from the villagers who populate their digital communities is presented as a charming quirk, a delightful bit of whimsy that adds character to interactions while avoiding the complexity of fully realized dialogue systems. The animalese that villagers speak, that collection of gibberish syllables and musical tones that accompanies text displays, serves to infantilize communication, reducing the rich complexity of human language to simplified emotional exchanges that prioritize cuteness over depth. Yet, this linguistic limitation is not merely a technical constraint or aesthetic choice, but a fundamental barrier to the formation of meaningful relationships. The villagers who inhabit these digital spaces are capable only of expressing predetermined sentiments through combinations of pre-written dialogue trees, their conversational abilities constrained by programming that ensures they never stray beyond boundaries established by developers who understood that genuine communication might lead to questions that threaten the stability of the artificial world they have created. The conversations that players believe they are having with their digital neighbors are revealed, through careful observation, to be elaborate illusions of interaction, where the appearance of response and engagement masks the absence of actual understanding or authentic emotional exchange. Villagers respond to gifts with gratitude that is identical, regardless of the appropriateness or thoughtfulness of the offering. They express friendship through phrases that cycle through predetermined variations without regard for the history or depth of their relationship with the player. They share personal information that never changes or develops, creating the impression of intimacy while actually maintaining absolute emotional distance. The psychological impact of such consistently artificial social interaction extends far beyond the boundaries of the game itself, conditioning participants to accept superficial exchanges as adequate substitutes for genuine human connection. Players who spend hours engaged in these simulated relationships may find their tolerance for the complexity and unpredictability of real human interaction gradually diminished, their expectations calibrated to the predictable pleasures of artificial companionship rather than the challenging rewards of authentic relationship. The reduction of language to simple emotional exchanges eliminates the possibility of engaging with complex ideas, philosophical questions, or nuanced emotional states that cannot be expressed through cheerful platitudes and predetermined responses. The villagers cannot discuss their fears, their dreams beyond the simplistic aspirations programmed into their dialogue systems, their understanding of their own existence, or their relationship to the broader community they inhabit. They exist in a permanent state of emotional childhood, capable of simple pleasures and basic needs, but fundamentally unable to engage with the deeper questions that give meaning to conscious existence. The postal system that connects island communities to the broader world presents itself as a romantic throwback to earlier eras of communication, when letters carried weight and importance that electronic messages have lost in their instantaneous abundance. Yet the cheerful efficiency of Pete, Phyllis, and Pelly masks a surveillance apparatus that monitors every piece of correspondence while maintaining the illusion of private communication between isolated communities. The suspicious speed with which letters arrive at their destinations, the perfect reliability of a postal system that never loses or misdelivers important communications, the uncanny ability of postal workers to know exactly when and where to find recipients, regardless of their location or activity. All of these elements point to a level of surveillance and coordination that would be impossible without systematic monitoring of every aspect of islander behavior and communication patterns. The standardized responses that players receive to many of their letters suggest systematic screening and filtering of communications, with automated systems generating replies that maintain the illusion of personal attention while actually preventing genuine dialogue or the exchange of information that might threaten established power structures. The postal workers themselves, despite their apparent dedication to their duties, display behavioral patterns that suggest either artificial intelligence or psychological conditioning that prevents them from acknowledging the surveillance aspects of their work. The love triangle that supposedly exists between Pete, Phyllis, and Pelly serves as a distraction from more serious questions about their role in maintaining communication control, their access to private correspondence, and their function as gatekeepers who determine which messages reach their intended recipients and which disappear into the bureaucratic machinery of institutional oversight. Their romantic complications provide human interest that discourages deeper examination of their systematic violation of communication privacy. The online multiplayer features that promise genuine social interaction between players reveal themselves to be even more constrained than the single-player relationships with artificial villagers. The limited communication options available during visits, pre-selected phrases, simple gestures, the ability to exchange items eliminate the possibility of meaningful conversation or the development of relationships that extend beyond material exchange and superficial pleasantries. The focus on trading items and showing off island developments reduces human interaction to commercial transactions and competitive display, transforming what should be opportunities for genuine connection into marketplace encounters, where the value of relationships is measured through the rarity of objects exchanged or the impressiveness of achievements demonstrated. Players learn to evaluate potential friends, not through compatibility of interests or depth of character, but through the quality of their island development and their willingness to provide access to rare or valuable resources. The artificial nature of multiplayer relationships becomes apparent through their inability to survive separation from the game environment. Friendships formed through Animal Crossing rarely translate into broader social connections, remaining confined to the specific context of island visits and item exchanges. The personalities that players develop for their interactions within the game often bear little resemblance to their authentic selves, creating relationships based on artificial personas rather than genuine character traits and interests. The surveillance systems that monitor online interactions, ostensibly designed to prevent inappropriate behavior and maintain community standards, actually serve to eliminate spontaneity and authenticity from social exchanges. The awareness that all communications are monitored and subject to moderation creates psychological pressure to conform to expected behavioral patterns, discouraging the kind of vulnerable honesty and emotional risk-taking that authentic relationships require. The silence that surrounds meaningful discourse in Animal Crossing extends beyond technical limitations to encompass systematic exclusion of topics that might threaten the artificial positivity that defines the game's emotional landscape. Villagers cannot discuss death, loss, conflict, injustice, or any of the complex realities that give depth and meaning to genuine human experience. They exist in a perpetual state of manufactured contentment that denies the full spectrum of emotional reality. This enforced positivity creates psychological pressure on players to suppress their own complex emotions in favor of the simplified happiness that the game rewards and celebrates. Feelings of sadness, anger, confusion, or existential questioning have no place in a world designed to provide escape from such complications. Yet, the systematic denial of these aspects of human experience creates emotional fragmentation that makes authentic self-expression increasingly difficult both within and beyond the game environment. The inability of villagers to acknowledge systemic problems, to question the authority of figures like Tom Nook or Isabelle, to express dissatisfaction with their living conditions or social arrangements. All of these limitations serve to normalize acceptance of problematic circumstances and discourage critical thinking about power structures and social organization. Players learn through example that challenging authority or expressing dissatisfaction with established systems is not merely impossible but literally unthinkable. The superficial nature of all social interactions in Animal Crossing, the inability to discuss philosophy, politics, personal growth, creative expression, or any of the topics that occupy the attention of thoughtful adults, creates an environment where intellectual development is not merely stunted but actively discouraged. Through the systematic provision of alternatives that provide the psychological satisfaction of social engagement without any of the challenge or growth that genuine interaction might facilitate. The most disturbing aspect of the communication breakdown that characterizes Animal Crossing is not its existence, but its invisibility to participants who have learned to find satisfaction in artificial social exchanges that provide the comfort of predictable positive reinforcement while eliminating the uncertainty, challenge, and potential for growth that define authentic human relationships. The game trains players to prefer superficial pleasantness over meaningful connection, consistent validation over honest feedback, and artificial harmony over the productive conflict that drives personal and social development. The silence of meaningful discourse becomes a learned behavior that extends beyond the game environment, as players who have adapted to simplified social interactions may find themselves less capable of engaging with the complex, unpredictable, and often challenging nature of genuine human relationships that require patience, empathy, and the willingness to encounter perspectives and emotions that cannot be easily categorized or managed through predetermined response systems. In the domestic spaces where human beings construct their most intimate sense of identity and belonging, where the arrangement of objects and the use of private rooms should reflect the deepest aspects of personality and the authentic needs of daily existence, we discover instead a theater of performance where genuine privacy has been systematically eliminated in favor of curated displays designed to satisfy the expectations of invisible judges whose standards reflect not personal fulfillment, but institutional conformity to predetermined aesthetic and social norms. The concept of home, which throughout human history has represented sanctuary from public scrutiny and the space where authentic self-expression becomes possible away from social pressures and external expectations, has been transformed in Animal Crossing into a performance venue where every piece of furniture, every color choice, every decorative decision exists primarily to generate approval from evaluation systems that treat domestic space as content to be consumed rather than shelter to be inhabited. The progression from tent to mansion that defines the housing experience appears to offer expanding possibilities for self-expression and personal comfort, yet reveals itself through careful analysis to be a carefully designed psychological trap where apparent choice masks systematic manipulation toward ever-increasing debt and dependency. The initial tent, presented as a humble beginning that will naturally evolve into something grander, actually represents the last moment of genuine simplicity in the housing experience, a space small enough to feel authentically personal, yet already contaminated by the knowledge that expansion is not merely possible but inevitable. Each mortgage payment that reduces the debt burden simultaneously triggers new expansion opportunities that immediately create even larger financial obligations, ensuring that the concept of a paid-off home, that fundamental symbol of economic security and personal achievement, remains permanently beyond reach. The psychological manipulation inherent in this system becomes clear when we recognize that players cannot refuse these expansion opportunities without effectively ending their progression through the game's primary content delivery mechanism. The debt cycle that governs housing development serves multiple functions beyond simple financial extraction. creating psychological dependency that extends far beyond economic considerations. The routine of daily resource gathering to earn bells for mortgage payments establishes behavioral patterns that consume time and attention while creating the illusion of productive activity. The anticipation of each expansion creates emotional investment in outcomes controlled entirely by Tom Nook's business interests. The satisfaction derived from completing payments is immediately undermined by the presentation of new, larger obligations that restart the entire psychological cycle. The Happy Home Academy's intrusion into private domestic space represents perhaps the most insidious violation of personal autonomy in the entire Animal Crossing experience, transforming the home from sanctuary into exhibition space, subject to constant evaluation by anonymous authorities, whose standards are never clearly articulated, yet whose approval becomes psychologically necessary for players who have internalized their judgment systems. The weekly letters that arrive with HHA scores and improvement suggestions carry the authoritative tone of professional interior design advice, yet reveal, through their content, a fundamental misunderstanding of what makes domestic spaces meaningful and comfortable for their inhabitants. The emphasis on matching furniture sets over personal preference, on adherence to predetermined themes over individual aesthetic vision, on the accumulation of expensive items over the thoughtful arrangement of meaningful objects. All of these priorities reflect commercial interess, rather than genuine concern for residential satisfaction or comfort. The psychological impact of constant home evaluation extends far beyond the game environment, conditioning players to view their own real-world living spaces through the lens of external approval rather than personal comfort and authentic self-expression. The internalization of HHA standards creates anxiety about decorative choices that should be entirely personal, transforming the home from a refuge from social pressure into another arena where performance anxiety and the fear of judgment shape daily decisions about comfort and aesthetics. The standardized rating system that reduces the complexity of domestic space to numerical scores eliminates consideration of factors that make homes genuinely meaningful: the memories associated with particular objects, the functional needs that guide arrangement decisions, the emotional significance of spaces that may appear unremarkable to outside observers but carry deep personal meaning for their inhabitants. The reduction of domestic life to scorable performance metrics represents a fundamental misunderstanding of what home means to human psychological well-being. The villagers who inhabit identical small houses throughout the community serve as a constant reminder of the housing inequality that defines the Animal Crossing social structure. Their permanent residence in spaces barely larger than the player's initial tent, highlighting the arbitrary nature of housing distribution and the systematic exclusion of non-player characters from the expansion opportunities that define the player experience. The fixed nature of villager housing creates a caste system where expansion and improvement remain permanently available only to the player character, while other community members exist in conditions of artificial scarcity that have no basis in resource availability or community planning needs. The acceptance of this inequality by villagers themselves, their apparent contentment with accommodations that never change or improve, suggests either psychological conditioning or systematic suppression of natural desires for better living conditions. The identical interior layouts and limited customization options available to villagers contrast sharply with the infinite expansion possibilities offered to the player, creating a visual reminder of hierarchical social organization that undermines any pretense of community equality or democratic decision-making. The villagers' homes become symbols, not of personal expression, but of standardized minimalism imposed by systems that allocate expansion opportunities based on species rather than need or desire. The commodification of domestic life through the endless furniture, acquisition, and arrangement systems transforms the home from a place of rest and authentic self-expression into a museum of consumer choices where personal identity becomes indistinguishable from shopping history and decorative preferences. The constant pressure to acquire new items, to rotate seasonal decorations, to upgrade furniture sets, and coordinate color schemes creates a domestic environment where stability and comfort are sacrificed in favor of perpetual renovation and change. The furniture crafting systems that promise creative expression through DIY projects actually limit creativity by constraining possibilities to predetermined patterns and material combinations, ensuring that even handmade items conform to standardized aesthetic templates. The recipes that govern crafting possibilities eliminate experimentation and personal innovation, reducing what should be creative expression to the systematic execution of predetermined designs using materials that must be acquired through specific resource extraction processes. The limitation of self-expression through preset item categories and themes creates artificial boundaries around personal aesthetic development, discouraging the kind of authentic style evolution that occurs when individuals experiment freely with combinations of objects, colors, and arrangements that reflect their genuine preferences rather than commercial design templates. The reduction of personality to decorative choices eliminates consideration of how domestic spaces can support specific activities, personal rituals, or individual needs that cannot be addressed through furniture arrangement alone. The interior design systems that promise unlimited creative freedom actually function as identity prisons, where self-expression becomes limited to selection among predetermined options that reflect commercial aesthetic categories, rather than authentic personal vision. The themes and sets that organize furniture collections discourage mixing and experimentation, creating pressure to maintain visual coherence that prioritizes conventional design principles over personal comfort and meaningful object relationships. The most disturbing aspect of housing in Animal Crossing is not the debt systems that ensure permanent financial obligation, or the evaluation systems that transform private space into public performance, but the systematic replacement of authentic domestic experience with artificial alternatives that provide the visual satisfaction of home ownership while eliminating the deeper psychological benefits that real homes provide through stability, privacy, and the gradual accumulation of meaningful objects and spatial arrangements that reflect personal growth and changing needs over time. The homes that players work so diligently to expand and decorate become not expressions of authentic selfhood, but monuments to their successful completion of consumption tasks and their conformity to aesthetic standards established by systems designed to benefit commercial interests rather than residential satisfaction. The energy and creativity that should go toward creating genuinely comfortable and meaningful living spaces is instead channeled into activities that simulate homemaking while actually preventing the development of authentic domestic skills and the deep personal satisfaction that comes from creating spaces that truly support individual needs and reflect genuine personal development. The replacement of real homemaking with virtual home decoration, of genuine domestic accomplishment with artificial achievement systems, of authentic personal space with performance venues designed for external evaluation. These substitutions represent not harmless entertainment, but training in accepting diminished expectations for what home can and should provide in terms of psychological sanctuary, creative expression, and the basic human need for spaces where authentic selfhood can develop away from the constant pressure to perform for systems designed to extract value from human domestic instincts, while providing none of the genuine satisfaction that real homes offer to those who inhabit them with intention and care. In the endless recursion of days that blend seamlessly into one another without variation or growth, where each sunrise brings not new possibilities, but the identical repetition of activities that have lost all meaning through mechanical repetition, we encounter the ultimate horror that Animal Crossing offers not death, which would at least provide finality and resolution, but the eternal present of artificial existence where time passes without change, where experience accumulates without wisdom, and where consciousness persists in a state of permanent stagnation that masquerades as peaceful contentment. The Groundhog Day phenomenon that governs daily life in these digital communities reveals itself not as charming routine, but as existential nightmare, a temporal prison where the illusion of choice masks the reality of endless repetition. Each morning brings the same announcements from Isabelle, the same rotation of available activities, the same conversations with villagers whose dialogue trees cycle through predetermined variations that create the appearance of novelty while actually delivering only minor permutations of identical content. The villagers who inhabit this eternal present demonstrate a form of acceptance that borders on the pathological, their cheerful engagement with daily routines that never lead anywhere, never accomplish anything lasting, never contribute to personal growth or community development that extends beyond the accumulation of material objects and the completion of arbitrary tasks, designed to consume time without providing meaning. Their contentment with endless repetition suggests either profound philosophical acceptance of cyclical existence or psychological conditioning so complete that they have lost the capacity to recognize the meaninglessness of their activities. The player's gradual recognition of the repetitive nature of daily island life often arrives as a slow dawning horror. The realization that activities which initially felt productive and meaningful have become mechanical rituals, performed not for their inherent satisfaction, but to maintain the illusion of progress in a system designed to provide the appearance of advancement while actually ensuring that no genuine development or completion ever occurs. The morning routine of checking shops, talking to villagers, completing daily tasks, and managing resources creates rhythms that feel natural and purposeful until the moment of recognition that these same activities will be performed again tomorrow, and the day after that, and every day thereafter, without variation or the possibility of transcendence. The comfort derived from predictable routines transforms into psychological trap when predictability becomes inevitability and routine becomes prison. The progress mechanics that initially provide satisfaction and motivation, paying off debts, expanding homes, completing collections, developing the island, reveal themselves to be treadmills designed to create the illusion of advancement, while actually ensuring that completion remains permanently beyond reach. Each goal achieved immediately generates new objectives that require the same types of activities, the same resource gathering, the same time investment, but with escalated requirements that make previous achievements feel insignificant. The expansion of the island through terraforming and infrastructure development promises meaningful change and lasting accomplishment, yet delivers only cosmetic variations that do not address the fundamental emptiness of activities that consume enormous amounts of time and energy, while producing no lasting value or genuine satisfaction. The ability to reshape landscapes and construct elaborate designs provides the illusion of creative expression, while actually constraining creativity within predetermined systems that limit possibilities to variations on established themes. The realization that completion is impossible, that catalogs will continue to expand with new items, that seasonal events will cycle endlessly without providing lasting rewards, that relationships with villagers will never deepen beyond programmed parameters, that the island will never become truly finished or perfect, arrives as a profound psychological crisis for players who have invested months or years of daily attention in pursuit of goals that were designed to be perpetually out of reach. The absence of natural life cycles in Animal Crossing creates an environment where growth, aging, death, and renewal, the fundamental processes that give meaning to temporal existence, have been systematically eliminated in favor of artificial stasis that preserves the appearance of life while removing its essential characteristics. The villagers do not age, do not die, do not reproduce, do not evolve in their thinking or relationships, creating communities of immortal beings trapped in permanent emotional and intellectual childhood. The implications of immortality without growth become apparent through extended observation of villager behavior, their endless repetition of the same conversations, the same activities, the same seasonal celebrations that never deepen through repetition or create lasting memories that influence future behavior. They exist in a state of eternal present where yesterday has no more significance than a dream, and tomorrow holds no possibilities beyond minor variations on today's predetermined activities. The seasonal changes that initially provide variety and the impression of temporal progression reveal themselves to be artificial cycles that repeat without cumulative effect, where autumn leaves fall and spring flowers bloom in patterns that create the appearance of natural time while actually delivering only cosmetic variations that do not reflect genuine seasonal processes or their psychological and spiritual significance for conscious beings who understand their place in larger temporal cycles. The player character's own exemption from aging and death creates a form of existential vertigo, where the normal markers of personal development and life progression are absent, leaving only the accumulation of objects and the completion of arbitrary achievements as measures of time's passage. The absence of biological aging, of physical changes that reflect the passage of years, of the natural processes that create urgency and meaning in mortal existence, transforms the player into another immortal being, trapped in eternal present, without the psychological framework necessary to find meaning in infinity. The digital purgatory that emerges from these conditions, the peaceful surface that conceals existential emptiness, the constant activity that produces no lasting results, the social interactions that never deepen or evolve, represents not the achievement of paradise, but its opposite, a state of being where the conditions that make life meaningful have been systematically eliminated in favor of artificial alternatives that provide temporary satisfaction while preventing genuine fulfillment. The addiction to meaningless but satisfying activities becomes a substitute for authentic engagement with life's genuine challenges and opportunities, creating psychological dependencies on systems designed to provide the neurochemical rewards associated with accomplishment and progress, while actually delivering only the simulation of these experiences without their substance or lasting value. The comfort derived from predictable rewards and manageable challenges becomes a trap that makes the uncertainty and difficulty of real growth feel overwhelming and undesirable. The escape from real-world problems into artificial ones that can be easily solved creates a psychological pattern where genuine challenges the development of skills that require sustained effort, the building of relationships that involve risk and vulnerability, the pursuit of goals that matter beyond personal satisfaction become increasingly difficult to engage with as the tolerance for uncertainty, failure, and delayed gratification erodes through constant exposure to systems that provide immediate rewards for minimal effort. The gradual replacement of genuine accomplishment with virtual achievement represents not harmless entertainment, but systematic training in accepting artificial substitutes for authentic human experience, conditioning participants to find satisfaction in activities that simulate rather than create real value, that provide the appearance of productivity, while actually consuming time and energy that could be directed toward endeavors that contribute to personal growth, community development, or the creation of lasting value that extends beyond the boundaries of digital simulation. The most disturbing aspect of the eternal present that defines Animal Crossing is not its existence, but its appeal, the way it provides relief from the genuine challenges and responsibilities of temporal existence, while gradually eroding the psychological capabilities necessary for engaging meaningfully with the real world where time moves forward, inexorably, where actions have lasting consequences, where relationships require sustained effort and vulnerability, and where genuine accomplishment demands patience, persistence, and the willingness to risk failure in pursuit of goals that cannot be achieved through the systematic completion of predetermined tasks. The peaceful surface that conceals existential emptiness becomes addictive precisely because it offers escape from the anxiety and uncertainty that define authentic human existence. Yet this escape comes at the cost of the very experiences that make life meaningful. The struggle with genuine challenges, the growth that comes from overcoming real obstacles, the satisfaction that emerges from creating lasting value through sustained effort, and the deep fulfillment that can only be found through engaging fully with the beautiful, difficult, unpredictable reality of existence in a world where time moves forward, where change is constant, and where the meaning we create through our choices and relationships becomes the only immortality available to mortal beings who understand that their time is limited and therefore precious beyond measure. And so we conclude our journey through the darker implications of this seemingly innocent world, where corporate control masquerades as neighborly help and artificial intelligence poses as genuine friendship. We have seen how the mechanics of debt, surveillance, and endless consumption create a perfect prison disguised as paradise, a place where freedom is an illusion and happiness comes at the cost of authentic human experience. Perhaps the most disturbing truth is not that Tom Nook is a calculating businessman or that the villagers are trapped in cycles of meaningless repetition, but that we, the players, find comfort in this controlled environment. In a world of uncertainty and genuine struggle, the predictable patterns and manageable problems of Animal Crossing offer a seductive alternative to real growth and meaningful challenge. The island paradise that promises escape from the complexities of modern existence delivers exactly what it advertises, but at a price that few participants recognize until they have already paid it in full. The escape is real. Escape from the responsibility of making choices that matter, from the uncertainty of relationships that might disappoint or reject us, from the challenge of developing skills that require sustained effort and the risk of failure, from the anxiety of pursuing goals whose achievement is not guaranteed by program systems designed to reward participation rather than accomplishment. The comfort we derive from Tom Nook's debt systems, which provide the illusion of financial responsibility without real consequences, reflects our complex relationship with economic security in a world where genuine financial stability often remains beyond reach despite years of effort and careful planning. The game offers a simplified version of economic life where debt is manageable, where payment always leads to reward, where the basic necessities of housing and furnishing can be obtained through predictable effort rather than the uncertain navigation of real estate markets, credit systems, and economic forces beyond individual control. The surveillance apparatus that monitors every aspect of island life provides the comfort of constant attention and care without the invasion of privacy that such monitoring would represent in reality. Isabel's cheerful announcements and the Happy Home Academy's evaluation letters deliver the psychological benefits of being noticed and cared for, while eliminating the vulnerability and reciprocal obligation that genuine attention from real people would require. The artificial personalities of the villagers offer the satisfaction of social connection without the unpredictability, emotional labor, and potential for conflict that define real relationships. They provide consistent, positive reinforcement, predictable responses to kindness, and the appearance of friendship without requiring the mutual understanding, shared growth, and emotional investment that authentic relationships demand. The temporal manipulation that allows players to skip through waiting periods and revisit favorite moments serves as both metaphor and training ground for the broader human desire to control time itself, to fast forward through difficult periods, to replay moments of happiness, to escape the linear progression of experience that brings both loss and growth in equal measure. The ability to manipulate time in the game provides temporary relief from the anxiety of temporal existence, but at the cost of learning to tolerate and find meaning in the natural rhythms of waiting, anticipation, and acceptance that define mature engagement with temporal reality. The collection mechanics that drive endless accumulation of virtual objects mirror the materialistic impulses that dominate consumer culture, while offering a sanitized version where acquisition brings guaranteed satisfaction rather than the diminishing returns and environmental consequences that characterize real-world consumption. The museum that celebrates the systematic capture and display of living creatures provides the satisfaction of learning about nature while eliminating any need for the patience, observation skills, and ecological understanding that genuine naturalist engagement would require. The housing systems that promise ownership and self-expression through interior design offer simplified versions of the homemaking impulses that drive real estate markets and home improvement industries, but without the financial risk, maintenance responsibilities, or the deep satisfaction that comes from creating truly functional and meaningful domestic spaces that support authentic daily life, rather than serving as display venues for accumulated possessions. The most profound revelation of our exploration is not the existence of these artificial alternatives to authentic human experience, but their effectiveness in providing psychological satisfaction that feels genuine to participants who have become accustomed to accepting simulated versions of fulfillment rather than pursuing the more difficult and uncertain path toward authentic achievement and meaningful relationship. The villagers who repeat the same conversations day after day, trapped in cycles of artificial cheerfulness that never acknowledge the deeper currents of existence, serve as mirrors for human beings whose own days have become filled with scripted interactions, whose authentic selves have been buried beneath layers of social conditioning designed to optimize productivity and consumption, rather than support genuine personal development and meaningful connection with others and the natural world. The endless cycles of debt and expansion that define the housing experience reflect economic systems that have transformed the basic human need for shelter into mechanisms for generating perpetual obligation and consumption, where the concept of enough space, enough possessions, enough security has been systematically eliminated in favor of artificial scarcity and manufactured desire that ensures continued participation in systems designed to benefit others rather than provide genuine satisfaction to participants. The surveillance systems that monitor every aspect of island life mirror the data collection practices of digital platforms that track human behavior with unprecedented precision, while providing convenience and personalized service in exchange for privacy and autonomy. The cheerful presentation of monitoring as care, the framing of surveillance as service, the transformation of privacy violation into customized experience, all of these elements reflect broader cultural changes that have normalized the systematic observation of private life in exchange for technological conveniences that provide immediate gratification while gradually eroding the psychological and social benefits of genuine privacy and unobserved, authentic self-expression. The artificial personalities that populate the digital world reflect the increasing prevalence of scripted interactions in real-life customer service representatives, following predetermined conversation trees, social media influencers performing carefully constructed personas, automated systems that simulate human response while actually delivering only programmed variations on predetermined themes. The comfort players find in predictable artificial social interaction suggests both the appeal of relationships without risk and the gradual erosion of tolerance for the uncertainty, vulnerability, and potential disappointment that characterize authentic human connection. As you drift towards sleep, consider whether the peace we find in these digital spaces comes from genuine contentment or from the temporary relief of surrendering agency to systems that promise to take care of everything. The Island Getaway Package offers exactly what it promises: complete escape from the genuine challenges and responsibilities that make human existence both difficult and meaningful. The most unsettling aspect of Animal Crossing is not its dark secrets or hidden manipulations, but how willingly we embrace the comfort of beautiful captivity, how readily we trade authentic experience for artificial alternatives that provide immediate satisfaction, while gradually eroding our capacity for the patience, persistence, and vulnerability that real growth and meaningful relationships require. The villagers trapped in their endless cycles of cheerful repetition, the corporate mascots performing their eternal roles, the surveillance systems monitoring every breath and heartbeat. All of these elements serve as friendly faces for our own systematic displacement from authentic human experience into controlled environments that simulate rather than provide genuine fulfillment, belonging, and meaning. In seeking escape from genuine challenges, we risk losing not only our capacity for real growth, but our very ability to distinguish between authentic satisfaction and artificial fulfillment. The digital paradise becomes not a temporary retreat, but a permanent substitute, offering the appearance of meaningful activity while gradually replacing our engagement with the beautiful, difficult, uncertain reality of human existence with comfortable alternatives that provide predictable rewards for minimal risk. Yet recognition of these systems need not lead to despair, but to awareness that can inform more conscious choices about when and how we engage with artificial alternatives to authentic experience. Understanding the mechanisms of digital comfort can illuminate the genuine sources of human satisfaction that no simulation can truly replace: the unpredictable rewards of real relationship, the deep satisfaction of developing skills through sustained practice, the profound meaning that emerges from engaging fully with challenges that matter beyond personal comfort. The island may be a beautiful prison, but it remains, in the end, only a game. The true world beyond the screen still offers possibilities for genuine connection, authentic achievement, and the kind of growth that can only come through engaging with real challenges alongside other imperfect human beings who are struggling with the same fundamental questions about meaning, purpose, and the nature of a life well lived. Rest now, knowing that tomorrow's real world awaits with all its genuine complexity and authentic possibility for true connection, meaningful work, and the kind of freedom that can never be purchased with bells or granted by benevolent authorities, but must be claimed through the patient, difficult, and ultimately rewarding work of becoming fully human in a world that offers both beauty and terror, both comfort and challenge, both artificial paradise and authentic meaning in equal measure.